The council has no idea what they just invited into this palace. Like, genuinely, truly. If these men knew that 3 days before I woke up in these robes, I was dissecting a rival's supply chain from a basement in Southside Chicago. If they knew I once sat in a room with 5 men who wanted me dead and walk about with all of them working for me. If they knew that my entire survival strategy for the Mercer Syndicate was to be the person everyone feared, but nobody could prove why. They wouldn't be smirking at me from across this throne room. They'd be looking for the nearest exit. My name is Kai Mercer. I'm 32 years old. I was the head of the Mercer Syndicate, an operation that ran 3 states and didn't leave room for mistakes. In my world, puppet was just another word for victim, and I haven't been a victim since I was 11 years old. My second in command was Dion. I'd like to clarify that I made Dion everything he was. I'd also like to clarify that he's the reason I'm here, putting a bullet in my back while I was eating a dinner I'd cooked myself. Because in Chicago, you don't trust a soul to touch what you eat. He thought he was ending my story. Instead, he just moved the territory. And these counselors, they think they've inherited a weakling. They're about to find out they've just handed a kingdom to a man who knows exactly how to tear one down. Let me tell you what I notice first. It isn't the robes or the ancient architecture. What I notice are the expressions. I've been reading faces since I was 11 years old, running numbers on street corners. By 25, I owned those corners. By 30, I owned the city. I know the look of a man who thinks he's talking to a dead man walking. The minister in front of me has that look. He thinks he's the one holding the leash. He's about to find out that I didn't claw my way to the top of the Chicago underworld just to be some royal's puppet. Every single person in that room has the same face. Respectful on top, something else underneath. The patient, waiting look of people who have already decided what this meeting is for and are just going through the paces of it. I know that look. I've sat across from it in back rooms and in negotiations with men who thought they were better at hiding things than they were. It's the look of someone who is not actually interested in what you're going to say. They're interested in confirming what they already believe. What they believe right now, every one of them, is that the man on this throne is going to flinch. I don't flinch. I don't say anything either. I just look, slowly. The way you work a room when you've just walked into a place that isn't yours yet, and you need to figure out the geometry of it before you move. The minister who's been talking, a compact man with a forehead built for worrying, trails off mid-sentence. The silence goes on 3 beats too long. Someone in the back coughs, nervously. "Continue," I say. The voice comes out quieter than I expected, quieter than the room expected, I think. Because I watched 2 of the older officials do something very small and very telling, a slight recalibration, like a man who expected a door to stick and found it smooth. Good, let them recalibrate. I need the time. Here's what the body knows. I figured this out the first night, sitting alone in chambers that smell like old wood and something floral I can't identify. Going through a stranger's memories the same way you'd go through a house after the previous tenant moved out in a hurry. Disorganized, emotional, marked by the specific chaos of someone who stopped cataloging their own situation a long time ago because cataloging it made it too real. Yi Se-yoon, 23 years old, installed as king 18 months ago by 3 men who needed a king the same way a man who wants to rob a house needs someone to show him where the key is hidden. Chief Counselor Lim Ye-won, the architect, 70 years old, 4 kings outlasted, the kind of patience that takes decades to build, and which I recognize because I spent years building a version of it myself. He's the one who identified Se-yoon, assessed the absence of political allies, the absence of military connections, the documented history of bending under pressure. Chose him the same way you'd choose a tool for the specific job it's suited for. Second counselor, Choi Byung-kyu, the enforcer, operations man, military connections, the type who doesn't build anything but is very effective at ensuring that other people's building projects go smoothly. He ran the grain operation. 3 consecutive harvest seasons, rural provinces going hungry while the capital's account books showed full granaries. The gold is his too, redirected through a merchant network he personally controlled, vanished into the kind of financial architecture that takes real effort to trace. Third counselor, O Tae-sung, the face. The one who smiled at court functions and gave speeches about the king's wisdom and attended the right dinners, and was, underneath every single performance, the man who made sure the public story held. He's the one I find most familiar, honestly. I've known people like Oh Tae-sung my whole life. They are always the most personally useful and the most personally dangerous because they have practiced being liked into something that functions exactly like a skill. What the three of them did with 18 months of access? They ran this kingdom like a private extraction operation. Taxes on the outer provinces structured to function as tribute, gold reserves through Choi's network gone, grain diverted 3 years running, and then, and this is the part that sits on me for a minute when I get to it, a border dispute with the neighboring Heirin kingdom, deliberately escalated through documents forged in the king's name. The Heirin forces are mobilizing. The council has formally recommended that the king lead the army personally. They are sending him to die. I sat with that for a while. Long enough to think about Dion, not with the rage, not yet, but just with the specific weight of what it means to be ended by the people who were supposed to be yours. Then I stopped sitting with it. Because back home, when you wanted a clean house, you did it before they expected it, not after. These men made one mistake. They scheduled it. 5 days. I have 5 days before the army mobilizes, and I use all of them in the way I've always used tight timelines. Not by panicking, not by making the kind of dramatic moves that tell everyone you know what's coming, but by doing the quiet, necessary work that looks from the outside like nothing at all. I don't call the counselors. I call the generals directly. Specifically, I go through the body's memories looking for who Seon trusted and find almost nothing, because the counselors made sure of that. Kept the king isolated, kept his access to military leadership managed and filtered. So I do what I always do when the information I have is incomplete. I read the room. I watch who stands straight in briefings and who, before answering a question, flickers their eyes to the counselors' faces first. 3 mid-ranked officers don't do the flicker. They're also, when I pull their records, people who've been passed over for promotion in ways that make no sense on paper. Good records, real field experience. Stalled. I know why they're stalled. Useful people who aren't loyal to the right people get stalled. That's not a Korean dynasty-specific problem. I summon them individually. Late at night. No court ceremony, no formal setting. Just a room, 2 chairs, and a man who is very tired of watching people perform at him. Sit down, I tell the first one. A man named Commander Sung, who enters the room braced for something and visibly doesn't know what to do when what he gets is an empty chair and eye contact. I'm not going to talk to you like a king. I'm going to talk to you like a man who needs people around him who are actually good at their jobs. He doesn't know what to do with that. They never do. I tell them what the battle strategy should be. Not from military training, I don't have any, but from the same part of my brain that managed territorial conflicts across 3 states for 6 years. You don't have to know the vocabulary to understand the logic. Supply lines are supply lines. Pressure points are pressure points. Where you make someone feel surrounded without actually surrounding them is a geometry problem. And geometry doesn't care what century it's in. The Heirin general's formation, based on what I've been given in the briefing documents, assumes a frontal engagement. They expect the king's army to come at them directly, because the king's army has always come directly at problems, because nobody has been telling this army to think laterally. So we don't go directly. We put real pressure on their left flank with enough force to demand attention. Then we wait. They rotate to meet it. Then we close from the right, from the angle they stopped watching. That's it. That's the whole thing. It's not a masterpiece of military strategy, it's basic. The masterpiece is in what comes after the surrender, the negotiation, the terms that are embarrassing enough to satisfy the crowd, but not so crushing that Heirin spends the next 10 years raising an army to restore its pride. A humiliated enemy is a future problem. I learned that before I was 20. The 3 officers leave those meetings looking like men who've been grabbed by the collar, not in a bad way, in the way where something just got reordered. On the 4th day, I ride out to observe the training formations, and there's a man at the outer gate being turned away. He's not a current anything, no insignia, no official capacity, nothing that would get him through the palace functionaries who have very specific ideas about who belongs inside and who doesn't. He's leaving when I ride past. We make eye contact for approximately 2 seconds. I pull my horse up. He's maybe 35, built like someone who has spent his entire adult life taking the physical requirements of his work seriously. The calluses on his hands are the wrong pattern for an administrative man. He clocked the gate guards automatically when he arrived. I can see it in where his eyes moved. Placement, armament, attention level. He did it without thinking, which means it's been habit long enough to become instinct. He's also doing the thing that certain kinds of people do when they expect to be dismissed, carrying the expectation of it like a braced muscle, ready for the impact.
Who are you? His jaw tightens, one small, controlled movement. Nobody of consequence to the throne, Your Majesty. That's not what I asked. A beat. He makes a decision. Park Hyen-soo, formerly General of the Northern Border Command. Formerly. I clock that word. I clock the posture. I put together the calluses and the guard assessment and the formerly and the fact that he came here without a summons and was leaving without a scene. Come inside. The gate functionary starts to say something. I don't look at him. I wasn't talking to you. The battle itself I'll tell you in the way it actually felt, which is not like anything you'd put in a history book. I am not a warrior, I know that. I put the people I trust in the positions where they can do what they're actually good at, and then I control the information, and I don't pretend to be the most important person in the room when I'm not. The most important person in a battle, from where I'm sitting, is Commander Sung on the right flank, who has been waiting 2 years for someone to tell him he was right about things and is currently proving it in real time. What I'm thinking while this is happening is mostly logistics. Is the supply line holding? Where's the Heron General's attention? When the flank pressure tips from manageable to urgent in his mind, and I'm watching his formations for that exact shift, the moment the response becomes reactive instead of planned. There it is. I give the signal. The Heron General surrenders before midday. He's a professional, and he can read what happened to his formation, and he also clearly has no personal investment in dying on this particular hill for a border dispute he probably didn't start. I negotiate his surrender myself. My 3 officers are slightly horrified by this. Kings don't negotiate directly, apparently. Kings send someone. I don't have anyone I trust to do this specific thing yet, so I do it myself, and we work out terms that give Heron a story to tell at home and give us what we actually need, which is a closed border and a decade without this particular problem. The 3 counselors are watching from the rear, from the position, I'll note, where they placed themselves to observe the king's death. They have nothing to say. I ride back to where they're standing, and I look at them and I say, "Good day, counselors." Then I ride on. The capital turns out to see the return, which I understand, but find mildly exhausting. They came out to watch a procession, possibly a funeral procession with a borrowed body at the front, and what they get is a king who sits his horse like he owns the ground it's walking on and looks at the crowd like he's memorizing faces. I'm not, specifically, but it doesn't hurt to let them wonder. The 3 counselors are at the Capitol gate with prepared speeches. They've been working on these, I can tell. Lim's is elegant and just specific enough to sound genuine. Choi's has the blunt momentum of a man who got handed a talking point and turned it into a wall. And Oh Tae-sung's is excellent. Really, I'll give him that. He has the kind of relationship with performed sincerity that other people spend careers trying to develop. I let them finish, all of it. Then I say, "We'll discuss the grain reports tomorrow, all 3 years." I walk inside. Here's something I learned early. You don't start with the most visible thing. You start with the thing nobody's watching. The head cook has been skimming from the palace food budget for 2 years and has been reporting to Counselor Choi's people about what the king ate and when. He's not a villain in his own story. He's a man who was offered an arrangement he didn't have the standing to refuse and has been living with that choice. I don't have anger for him. I have information. I reassign him to an outer province kitchen, politely, with documentation that frames it as a standard rotation. He goes without making a noise, because he knows, somewhere in the back of his understanding, that a noise would cost him more than the assignment. I put someone new in his place, someone who has no connection to anyone in the current network. Someone I picked based on a very simple criterion. When I asked her a direct question, she answered it directly. Then I do the same thing with the next layer and the next. Each removal documented, official, procedurally correct. Nothing that can be challenged, nothing that can be pointed at as arbitrary. Nothing that gives anyone a clean grievance to hold. The three counselors start watching each other. I know they're doing it because I can see the specific quality of attention they've started paying to the court. Checking, rechecking, trying to figure out which thread I've pulled and how far it goes. It goes quite far, actually. Hyun-soo keeps appearing. I haven't given him an official role. I gave him access to the palace, which turns out to have been the relevant thing, because he interprets access as license to be wherever he's useful and doesn't wait to be invited into rooms. He shows up in the training yards, in the corridors outside the strategy rooms, in the library where I spend hours going through financial records I've been pulling from the archives, because financial records are a language I've spoken my entire adult life, and it turns out grain diversion and treasury fraud read the same way in any century. He doesn't trust what he's seeing. This is not a performance of distrust. He's genuinely working through something that doesn't add up. He knew Lee Sa-jun. Not well, because the counselors made sure nobody got close to the king, but well enough to have a baseline. And the man he's watching now does not match that baseline in any way he can account for. He tests me, asks questions he already knows the answer to, and watches how I respond. Waits for the slip. There's no slip, because it's not a performance. You cannot perform competence at the level of detail it takes to actually restructure a corrupted administrative network. You just either know how to do it or you don't. And I know how to do it because I've been doing a version of it since I was 19 years old. One afternoon, he's in the doorway, and I'm working through a ledger. I find a number that doesn't belong. It's small, deliberately small, because whoever built this system built it to be defensible in the small cases, knowing that the pattern across all of them is where the real damage lives. And I go very still.
Get me the names of every official who signed off on this, I say to the attendant present, going back 4 years. I want the list before dinner. Not a shout, not a dramatic moment, just that specific quiet that means the decision has already been made, and now I'm collecting the paperwork for it. I look up, and Hyun-soo is in the doorway. His expression is doing something I can't fully read, which is unusual because I read expressions for a living. He leaves without saying anything. He's back the next morning. Late, I'm still in the records room when he appears in the doorway, which is becoming a pattern I've stopped commenting on. You keep appearing, I say. You keep not having me removed. I consider this. What do you want? To understand what I'm looking at. The silence is long enough to be honest. A man who's cleaning up a mess, I say finally. Same as you tried to do. You just did it through the right channels. I don't have that kind of patience. He stares at me for a while. Then, the king I knew was afraid of loud noises. That king is gone. Something shifts. I can't identify it precisely, which means it matters. The council is going to move against you when they realize what you're doing. I know. Do you have a plan? I have 3. He leaves, but he's back the next morning, and the morning after that. Lim Jae-won has outlasted 4 kings, and I respect that the way you respect weather, not because it's good, but because it's real. He doesn't panic when things start going sideways. He adapts. That's what 50 years of palace politics produces. A man who has learned to treat every threat as a variable to be managed, rather than a crisis to react to. His move is elegant. He goes to the nobility, specifically the old families who benefited from the council's arrangements, the merchants who moved the gold, the provincial lords who looked the other way at the grain diversion in exchange for favorable tax treatment. He frames my dismantling not as justice, but as instability. A king who removes loyal servants without warning, a king who bypasses the council's advisory role, a king who might turn on any of them next. The goal isn't to remove me directly. The battle victory made that impossible. The crowds saw it. The story is set. The goal is to make me ungovernable, cut off my access, my information, my ability to move pieces on a board I'm still learning. I notice because coalition building looks the same everywhere. Suddenly, the officials I need for the archive review are unavailable. The merchants I wanted records from have conflicting information. 3 mid-rank palace officials I haven't touched yet resigned simultaneously, in writing, with identical wording in their letters. Identical wording? That's Lim. The other 2 don't have the discipline for identical wording. Choi's people write like they're drafting incident reports. O's people write beautifully, but they'd vary the language because O values the appearance of individuality. This flat, identical structure, 3 letters, same sentence rhythm, same specific framing of gratitude for service rendered, is Lim's hand. I call Hyun-soo. This is the first time I've been the one to call him, and we both notice it without saying so. I need to know who Lim Jae-won has been meeting with for the last 3 weeks. He looks at me. I'm not in your service. I know. You're not going to offer me a position, resources, my rank back? I don't bribe people I want to trust. The silence afterward is very long. Something's being decided in it. I'll find out what I can, he says finally. Choi Byung-kyu is not a patient man. This is not a character flaw in every context. There are situations where impatience is exactly the right gear. But in this specific situation, with this specific problem, the inability to wait for Lim's strategy to mature is what breaks him. He sends a contractor, professional work, outside his direct network with a cover story pointing toward a Heron loyalist seeking revenge for the border defeat. It's actually a well-constructed cover story. If I'd been where I was supposed to be, it might have been difficult to trace back. The problem is that I figured out within the first week that Yi Sejan's entire life was predictable in a way that had gotten him controlled, and I changed everything. When I eat, where I sleep, which corridors, what time, what routine. The assassin breaks into an empty room. My people have him within an hour. I don't touch him. I talk to him, patiently. In the specific way where I'm not asking him to tell me things, I'm helping him understand that talking is the only door in this room that leads anywhere. He's a professional. He calculates options quickly. By morning, I have Choi's network map. Hyun-soo comes to me with 2 things. The coalition list first. Who Lim has been meeting with, which families, which merchants, the shape of the thing Lim is building. He got it through contacts from his Northern Border Command years, people who were loyal to him rather than to anyone currently in power, which makes the information clean. Then the second thing. Documentation. Records he found while he was looking for the coalition information. Records that have been sitting in Chief Counselor Lim's personal files for 18 months. Records that include the original complaint Hyun-soo filed against Choi's grain operation, the full complaint, with the original evidence attached, evidence that was never submitted to anyone because Lim intercepted it, read it, and realized that a general with documented proof of Choi's operation was a lever and used it as one. His own evidence, his own integrity weaponized against him. I watch his face when he understands the full shape of it. The stillness that comes over a person when something they suspected becomes something they know. He didn't just destroy your career, I say. He used your integrity as a weapon against you. Hyun-soo doesn't answer. His jaw is doing the thing it does when something is being held very controlled. I put the documents on the table between us. This belongs to you. What you do with it is your choice. He looks at the documents. He looks at me. There's a long beat where I don't say anything else because there's nothing else to say, and he needs the space to sit with it. He picks up the documents. Oh Tae-song requests a private audience and arrives with a smile fully deployed. I've seen this smile before. Different face, same architecture. The specific warmth of a man who has spent so long performing sincerity that he's genuinely convinced himself it counts as having some. The speech is good, really. He's had time to prepare it, and he's talented. And in a different situation, with a different person across the table, it might have worked. He frames himself as a moderate, a man constrained by his colleagues, privately sympathetic to the crown, ready to cooperate now that the balance of power has shifted. He's offering his usefulness as a currency, which is the only currency he has. I let him finish, all of it. Then I open a folder. I read aloud, in the same flat tone I use for everything, a documented list of every meeting Oh Tae-sung attended, every document he signed, every specific occasion where he smiled at Yi So-yeon in public and turned that smile off the moment the king left the room. I don't editorialize, I just read. I know what you are, I say, when I finish, because I've sat across from you before. Different face, same smile. I'm thinking of Daeon, of the 6 years of that smile, of the specific loneliness of realizing in retrospect that you loved someone who was always just assessing what loving you back would cost him. Oh Tae-sung is formally charged by the end of the week. The evidence is meticulous, every charge procedurally correct. His lawyers, and he has very good lawyers, find nothing to grab onto. Oh does not go quietly. When I move on him using the network map the contractor gave me, he calls in his military contacts and does the thing men like Choi always do when the procedural options run out. He goes direct. Soldiers loyal to him take the outer palace gates. He's framing it as protecting the court from an unstable king. The story he's prepared is about foreign influence, about a king who came back from the battle, wrong, about the council's sacred duty to protect the kingdom's stability.
It's a decent story. It would have worked on a different king. The 3 officers I put in position before the battle have been quietly repositioning loyal forces for 2 weeks. I've been waiting for Choi to make this move, because a man with his particular combination of power and impatience was always going to make it, and the only question was timing. When you know someone's going to come at you directly, the strategic answer is to be already arranged when they arrive. His coup lasts 4 hours. At hour 4, his soldiers look at their formation and see what the Heirin general's soldiers saw on the battlefield. They've been managed into a position they didn't choose and can't easily leave. They're not loyal enough to Choi to die for a position that's already lost. Choi is arrested at the gate he thought he was holding. He's red-faced and loud about it, which I expected. Loud is all he has left. Lim Jae-won I invite to tea. I pour it myself. This is deliberate. It removes the whole question of whether the tea is safe, and also, I think, unsettles him in a way that nothing else I could do would, because it's not something that fits any category he has for how this meeting is supposed to go. We talk first, about his family, about his years of service, the real ones, the 40 years before the extraction operation, which were not nothing, about what he imagined his legacy would be when he was young and hadn't yet made the specific choices that brought us to this room. He answers carefully. He's waiting for the angle. Men who've done this for 50 years are always waiting for the angle. I slide the document across the table. His full resignation, pre-written, with a formal acknowledgement of the grain diversion, the tax scheme, the treasury fraud, structured specifically to protect the throne from liability while placing accountability entirely on the council. His name goes in the document. The throne's name comes out clean. Sign it, I say, and retire to your estate. Your family keeps everything. Your name doesn't appear in the public charges. He reads it very carefully, twice. And if I don't? I pick up my tea. Well, then we find out which version of your legacy your grandchildren have to carry. He looks at me for a long moment. He's trying to find the thing I'm holding back, the card I haven't shown, the leverage I'm planning to use if he refuses. He doesn't find it, because there isn't one. The document is the whole offer. I don't negotiate from hidden positions. He signs. What comes after is not a single dramatic moment. It's months of small ones. New kitchen staff, new palace servants, new officials, selected not for family connections but for competence and for the specific quality I've come to value above almost everything else. People who look me in the eye when they disagree with something. People who don't wait to see which way the wind is blowing before they form a position. It turns out these people exist. They've just spent the last 18 months being very careful about where they display that quality. The grain. I don't announce a redistribution, I implement one. Province by province, the shortages start correcting, not because I gave a speech about justice, but because I changed the routing, changed the accounting, put people in the distribution chain who are answerable to a tracking system that now functions correctly. The provinces don't know why the situation is improving, they just know it is. The taxes, reformed, through proper channels, properly documented. The outer provinces start receiving assessments that reflect what they actually owe rather than what the council decided would fund a comfortable theft. It's not dramatic, it's arithmetic. The kingdom doesn't understand what's happening, but it starts to feel it. Hyun-soo says to me one evening, we're in the records room, as usual, which has become the most consistent location in both our lives. The grain distribution in Pyeong province corrected faster than the model projected. The new route is shorter, less time in transit, less spoilage. He looks at me. You changed the route yourself. The logistics officer proposed it. I approved it. He proposed it because you asked him what he'd change if he could change anything. You asked all of them that. I look up from the ledger. They know their jobs, I say. I just needed to know what they know. Hyun-soo is quiet for a moment. You run this like... He starts and then stops. Like what? He shakes his head. Nothing. But I know what he was going to say, and he knows I know, and neither of us says it. The shift between us happens gradually, and then all at once, the way it always does. He stopped testing me sometime around the second month. He doesn't know exactly when. I know because I was watching for it, and the day it happened was the day he argued a Border Patrol redistribution plan with me for 40 minutes and never once glanced to see how I was receiving the challenge. He just argued, because he believed he was right. He was right, mostly. I changed the plan. What kind of king changes his mind? He said, after, not quite to me. A king who was wrong, I said. He looked at me for a moment. Then, the ones I knew before didn't operate that way. The ones I knew before didn't either. Something flickers in his expression, not quite a question, not quite understanding, just noticing. Late, very late. We've been working through border treaty drafts for hours, and the candles have burned to stubs, and neither of us has mentioned that we could stop. He says something about one of the provincial lords, a dry observation, very specific, landing precisely on the thing that makes that particular provincial lord quietly absurd, and I laugh. Not a polite sound, not something performed for the room, a real one, sudden and short, the kind that gets out before you've decided to let it. Hyun-soo goes still. I notice the stillness. I look at him. He's looking at me with an expression I have only ever seen on people who have just realized something is different from what they thought it was. Not dangerous different, just larger. The thing that is passing between us right now does not have a name I'm going to give out loud. It's late, he says. Yes, I say. Neither of us moves for another beat, long enough to mean something. Then he stands and leaves. I sit alone with whatever that was, in the specific way of a man who spent his entire life treating wanting things as a liability. Wanting things means someone can take them. Wanting things means there's a version of you that can be reached and hurt through the wanting. I know this. I have always known this. I sit with it anyway. He comes back the next morning. He always comes back. He's working before I'm fully seated, cross-referencing something in the border records with the provincial deployment schedules, moving through the documents with the efficiency of a man who has been doing this his whole life and doesn't need to perform focus. Normal. Except, he's been up all night. I can see it. And he is a man who, once he commits to something, commits completely. Which I've known since I watched him argue for 40 minutes about a border patrol plan he believed in, and I know what he's committing to right now without either of us saying it. Who are you? He says it directly. No lead-up, no approach.
I look up. You know who I am. I know who you're supposed to be. His voice is level. I knew the man who sat on that throne before. You are not him. The silence is the longest one we've had. The longest since the throne room, when I first arrived and held a court of people with nothing but the quiet. No, I say. Quietly. The same quiet I use for everything that actually costs me something. Same as him, same as you. Just from further away. He sits down. Not slowly, not dramatically. He just sits. The way a man sits when he's decided something and the deciding is done. He doesn't argue. He doesn't ask another question. He just stays. In the specific way that means, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to pretend I didn't hear that. I'm going to sit here with whatever this is and not make you carry it alone. That's it. That's all. But I have been carrying things alone for a very long time, and that's something. 3 months pass before the formal documentation comes through. Park Han-yeon's rank restored. Through proper channels, a full administrative review, the original complaint resubmitted and acted upon correctly, the evidence assessed by a newly constituted oversight process that I built specifically for cases like this one. His name cleared in every official record. The citation for the Northern Border Command appointment lists his actual qualifications, which are considerable, and does not mention the king at all. He comes to my study when the documents arrive. They're already on my desk. I put them there. He reads them. He reads them again. This took 3 months, he says. Proper channels take 3 months. You could have reinstated me in a week. I could have, and it would have meant something different, a personal favor from a king who decided to like you. This means, I stop. This means it was always true. It just took the system catching up to what was true. He sets the documents down. I'm looking at the window, at the light, at the specific quality of a morning in a city I have lived in for less than a year and have somehow started thinking of as mine. I leave in 3 days, he says. I know. Northern Border Command, the assignment he was trained for, the work he's actually good at, 3 days away by hard riding. The morning he leaves, I walk him to the outer gate myself. No attendants, just the 2 of us, in the early light through corridors I know now the way you know any place you've worked in long enough, not beautifully, not sentimentally, just specifically. This turn is the slow one. This door sticks in cold weather. This window gets the sun until mid-morning. You didn't have to walk me out, he says. I know. His horse is waiting. His travel pack is small. He has always traveled light, I've noticed, like a man who learned early not to carry more than he can manage alone. He checks the saddle, turns to look at me. Will you be here when I return? For him, this is enormous. I know that. I have watched him for 6 months, and I know exactly what it costs him to ask a direct question about wanting something. I think about Dion. I always think about Dion eventually. The 6 years, the shot from behind, the specific loneliness of being used by the person who was supposed to be yours. I think about Yi So-yoon, the 23-year-old who sat on a cold throne and got smaller every day until there was nothing left to be used. I think about whether I am the kind of person who gets to want things now. I look at him. I'll be here. Not a promise, a direction, the best I know how to give. He nods, gets on his horse, rides out through the gate, onto the road north without looking back, because he is the kind of person who commits completely and doesn't hedge. I watch until he's gone. Then I turn back to the palace. The palace, which is not fixed. I should be honest about that. It will take years, probably more years than I have in this borrowed body, and I've started thinking about that with a specific lack of anxiety that tells me something about who I've become in the last 6 months. It's not fixed. It's working. Those are different things. The kitchen staff knows who they answer to. The financial records are, for the first time in 4 years, accurate. The grain is moving. The taxes are honest. The provincial officials have started sending direct reports to the throne rather than rooting through a council that no longer has the same teeth. 3 mid-ranked officers have been promoted. An oversight process exists that didn't before. Not fixed, working. There's still a lot of work to do.
I walked back through the palace, through corridors that smell like wood and old stone and something floral I still haven't identified, past the records room and the strategy room and the library where I spent 3 months tracing financial structures that were built to be untraceable. I think about Yi So-jun, 23 years old, afraid of loud noises, installed to be used and then discarded. I didn't choose to be here. He didn't choose any of it either. But this place, this kingdom, these people, this early morning with the light coming in sideways is more his than it was, more like what it should have been. I hope, wherever he is, that counts for something. I sit at my desk. The morning reports are already stacked. There are 2 border disputes to address, a taxation appeal from the eastern provinces and a request from Commander Sung's division for updated supply routing. Normal work. The specific, ordinary urgency of a system that is trying to function correctly and mostly succeeding. I pick up the first report. And then, because a thought has been sitting at the back of my mind for months, quiet, waiting for the right moment, I let myself have it. Dion. 6 years. The shot I didn't hear coming. The man I pulled out of nothing who couldn't look me in the eye when he made his choice. I died at my own table and woke up on a throne. I won a war I didn't start, dismantled a corruption network from the kitchen up, ran a kingdom the same way I ran my operation, not through fear alone, but through reading people and rewarding competence and removing anyone who mistook access for loyalty. And I've been sitting here in this body, in this life which is either a second chance or a punishment or something that doesn't have a name, doing the work. Now that I'm done in this kingdom, it's time to go and face Dion.
The end.